Sarah, you pathetic little nobody. Did you honestly think someone like you could ever belong in a place like this? The venom in Helena Sterling's voice cut through me like a blade as I stood frozen in the opulent marble lobby of Sterling Enterprises, clutching the shattered remains of what had been an antique crystal vase worth more than my annual salary. The sound of priceless crystal hitting Italian marble had echoed through the space like a gunshot, and now every designer-suited executive in the lobby was staring at me with a mixture of pity and disgust. "Look at this disaster," Helena continued, her perfectly manicured hand gesturing dramatically at the sparkling fragments scattered across the floor. "This is exactly why people from the gutter should stay in the gutter. You're nothing but a coffee-serving peasant who somehow fooled her way past security." My cheeks burned with humiliation as whispers rippled through the crowd of onlookers. I'd been working as a barista in the building's exclusive cafe for 4 months, serving overpriced lattes to executives who looked through me like I was invisible. Every day I'd watch them stride past in their $1,000 suits, living in a world I could barely imagine, let alone touch. And now Helena Sterling, daughter of the company's founder and queen bee of New York's elite social circle, was making sure everyone knew exactly where I belonged. "I'm so sorry," I whispered, dropping to my knees to gather the crystal shards with trembling hands. "Please, I'll pay for it somehow. I'll work extra shifts. Don't be ridiculous." Helena's laugh was like ice crackling. "You couldn't afford this vase if you worked for a century. No, I think it's time we called security and had you removed from the premises permanently. Clearly, you're not capable of functioning in civilized society." That's when I heard it. A desperate, urgent whisper coming from beneath the massive marble reception desk just feet away from my humiliation. "Please, God, please, I'm begging you, help me." I froze, a crystal shard halfway to my palm, and glanced around in confusion. Helena was still delivering her public execution, but that voice, deep, refined, absolutely desperate, was coming from somewhere else entirely. Following the sound, I leaned slightly toward the reception desk and nearly gasped out loud. There, crammed into the shadows beneath the desk like a trapped animal, was Clark Sterling himself. The billionaire CEO of Sterling Enterprises, the man whose face graced the covers of every business magazine in the world, was hiding under his own company's reception desk. His usually immaculate dark hair was disheveled. His $5,000 suit was wrinkled, and his piercing blue eyes held a level of panic that no amount of money could hide. He reached out and grabbed my wrist with surprising gentleness, pulling me closer to his hiding spot. "I know this is insane," he whispered urgently, his breath warm against my ear. "But I need you to be my girlfriend. Right now, this second. I'll give you anything. Money, a job, a new life. Anything you want." I stared at him, certain I was having some kind of breakdown. "What?" "That psychopath in the red dress by the elevators." He nodded frantically toward the lobby's far end, where I could see a stunning redhead in a blood-red Valentino dress scanning the crowd like a predator. "She's been stalking me for 2 months. Her father owns half the defense contracts in America, and she's convinced we're soulmates destined for marriage. She's completely unhinged, and she's threatened to destroy my company if I don't propose to her." As if summoned by his words, the redhead's voice rang out across the marble expanse, sickeningly sweet and terrifyingly determined. "Clark, my darling, I know you're here. Stop playing these silly games. We have a wedding to plan." Clark's grip on my wrist tightened, and I could feel him trembling. "She bribed my security team. She's gotten into my penthouse, my office, my private jet. Yesterday, she had her father threaten to pull $3 billion in government contracts if I don't marry her by Christmas. I'm trapped, and she's getting closer every second." The irony was staggering. 30 seconds ago, I was being publicly destroyed by his sister for being nothing more than a worthless coffee girl who didn't deserve to breathe the same air as the Sterling family. And now the great Clark Sterling, the most powerful man on the East Coast, was literally begging me, a nobody from the gutter, to save him. "Mr. Sterling," I started, but he cut me off with pure desperation. "Clark, please, just Clark. And I'm serious about paying you. I'll give you $1 million right now today if you help me. 2 million, whatever it takes." His blue eyes searched mine with an intensity that made my heart skip. I know you have every reason to hate my family after what Helena just did to you, but I'm drowning here. You're my only chance." I looked back at Helena, who was still holding court with her audience of impressed sycophants, probably detailing my genetic inferiority for their entertainment. Then I looked at Clark, this impossibly powerful man reduced to hiding under furniture, his perfectly controlled world crumbling around him. The redhead's voice was getting closer. "I can smell your cologne, darling. You can't hide from destiny." "Please," Clark whispered, and the raw vulnerability in his voice did something to me that no amount of money could. "I know I'm asking the impossible, but save me. Just for 10 minutes. Let me breathe again." Something inside me snapped. Maybe it was the humiliation. Maybe it was the way his desperation made him human. Or maybe it was just the sheer cosmic justice of the situation. The coffee girl saving the billionaire who'd never once looked at her as anything more than furniture. "Okay," I whispered back, my heart hammering. "But you owe me more than money." Relief flooded his features like sunrise. "Anything. I swear, anything." He stood up, pulling me with him, and suddenly I was pressed against Clark Sterling's side, his strong arm around my waist like I belonged there. The entire lobby fell silent as every eye turned toward us. Helena's mouth dropping open in shock, the executives gaping, the redhead stalker freezing mid-stride. "Clark!" The redhead rushed forward, her face a perfect mask of makeup, barely concealing pure rage. "Who is this creature?" "Vivian." Clark's voice was steady now, commanding, the powerful CEO returning as he held me closer. "I'd like you to meet Sarah, my girlfriend." The word girlfriend sent electricity through my entire body, but I managed to smile up at him with what I hoped looked like adoration. His cologne was intoxicating, and I could feel the solid strength of his chest against my side, the way his heartbeat was still racing from fear and adrenaline. "Your what?" Vivian's screech could have shattered windows. "My girlfriend," Clark repeated, his arm tightening around me protectively, possessively. "We've been together for 6 months. She's the love of my life. The love of my life." Even as part of the act, the words made my knees weak. I could see Helena watching from across the lobby, her perfect composure completely shattered. The same woman who'd just declared me unfit to exist in civilized society was now watching me stand as equals with her brother, the most untouchable man in New York. "This is impossible," Vivian sputtered, her carefully constructed mask slipping to reveal something genuinely frightening underneath. "Your father promised me." "My father doesn't control my heart," Clark said firmly, and the way he looked down at me made the act feel dangerously real. "And I'd appreciate it if you'd respect my relationship and stop following me." Security was already moving toward Vivian, finally doing their job now that Clark was publicly rejecting her. As they escorted her out, still screaming threats about her father's contracts, Clark turned to me. "Thank you," he said quietly, his blue eyes holding mine with an intensity that made the rest of the world disappear. "I meant what I said about making this worth your while. Just don't let your sister destroy my life," I managed to say, still reeling from the feel of his arms around me. Clark glanced over at Helena, who was watching us with an expression caught between horror and fascination. "Helena," his voice carried absolute authority, "apologize to Sarah. Now." "Clark, you can't be serious." "Now." The single word contained enough power to move mountains. Helena's face went through several shades of red before she managed a strangled, "I apologize." As the lobby slowly returned to normal and people went back to pretending they hadn't just witnessed the impossible, I realized I was still standing in Clark Sterling's arms, still playing the role of his girlfriend. And despite everything, the humiliation, the absurdity, the sheer impossibility of it all, I never wanted this moment to end. "So," I said, looking up into those impossibly blue eyes, "what happens now?" His smile was nothing like the cold, perfect expression from magazine covers. This was warm, genuine, almost boyish. "Now, Sarah, we figure out how to convince the world that the billionaire and the coffee girl are madly in love. Because something tells me this is just the beginning." And just like that, My life as an invisible nobody was over. What was beginning, I had no idea, but as Clark Sterling looked down at me like I was the most precious thing in his world, I knew there was no going back. The most dangerous contract of my life was about to begin. $2 million to be my girlfriend for 3 months. Clark's words hung in the air of his private elevator as we ascended to the penthouse floor, the city of New York shrinking below us through the glass walls. I gripped the golden handrail, still trying to process how my life had gone from coffee-stained humiliation to standing beside the most powerful man in the city in the span of 20 minutes. "I'm sorry, what?" I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. He turned to face me fully, and I was struck again by how different he looked from his magazine photos. Up close, without the cameras and the perfect lighting, there were lines around his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights, a tension in his jaw that suggested the weight of his empire wasn't as easy to carry as he made it look. "I know it sounds insane," he said, running a hand through his dark hair. "But Vivian Morrison isn't going to give up. Her father, General Morrison, controls more military contracts than anyone else in the country. If he pulls his business..." Clark's jaw tightened. "I'd lose everything. 40,000 employees would lose their jobs because of my personal problems." The elevator continued its silent ascent, and I found myself studying his profile as he stared out at the city below. There was something almost vulnerable about the way he held himself, like the confident CEO facade was a suit he wore, but couldn't quite make fit properly. "So you want to pay me to pretend to be in love with you?" I said slowly, testing the words. "I want to pay you to help me save my company," he corrected, his blue eyes meeting mine. "And to give you a chance at the life you deserve." The life I deserve? I couldn't help the bitter laugh that escaped. "An hour ago, your sister made it very clear what kind of life I deserve." Something dark flashed across Clark's features. "Helena was wrong, and she'll never speak to you that way again." The elevator dinged softly as we reached the top floor, and the doors slid open to reveal a hallway that looked like it belonged in a palace. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and artwork that I was pretty sure belonged in museums lined the walls leading to massive double doors at the far end. "Welcome to my home," Clark said, gesturing for me to step out first. As we walked down the hallway, I became acutely aware of my coffee-stained blouse and my scuffed shoes against the pristine marble. This was a world I had no business being in, and every step reminded me of that fact. "Clark," I started, but he stopped walking and turned to face me. "Before we go any further," he said, his voice taking on a more formal tone, "I need you to understand what I'm asking. This isn't just about pretending to be my girlfriend in public. Vivian is smart, and she's ruthless. She'll investigate every aspect of our relationship. She'll have us followed, photographed, analyzed. We'll need to make this look completely real." "What does that mean exactly?" He moved closer, and I caught another whiff of his cologne, something expensive and distinctly masculine that made my heart skip. "It means we'll need to spend time together. Real time. You'll need to know things about me that only a girlfriend would know. My favorite foods, my fears, my dreams." He paused, studying my face. "And I'll need to know the same about you." The intimacy of what he was suggesting hit me like a wave. This wasn't just about playing a role. It was about letting someone into my life in a way I'd never allowed anyone before. "And the money?" I asked, hating how my voice sounded so small. $2 million transferred to any account you choose the moment you sign the contract. Another $1 million when we successfully convince Vivian to move on. His eyes never left mine. "And if you want a permanent position at Sterling Enterprises. Not in the cafe and the corporate offices, a real career." My breath caught. $3 million. A real career. A chance to never again be the girl cleaning up broken crystal while rich people laughed at her humiliation. "Why me?" I whispered. "You could have any woman in the city. Models, actresses, socialites who actually belong in your world." Clark's smile was soft, almost sad. "Because those women would want something real from me. They'd fall in love with the idea of being Mrs. Clark Sterling, and when this was over, they'd expect me to follow through." He stepped closer, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. But you have no illusions about who I am or what this world is like. You've seen the worst of it. You won't confuse business with pleasure." There was something in his voice that made me think he was trying to convince himself as much as me. The double doors at the end of the hallway opened with a soft click, and we stepped into what had to be the most beautiful apartment I'd ever seen. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Manhattan, while the interior was a perfect blend of modern luxury and classic elegance. Everything was in shades of cream and gold, with splashes of deep blue that matched Clark's eyes. "This is incredible," I breathed, walking toward the windows. "It's just a place to sleep," Clark said dismissively, but I caught him watching my reaction with something that looked almost like pride. "No, it's not." I turned to face him, and for a moment, the carefully constructed walls between us seemed to lower. "This is your sanctuary, your escape from everything down there." I gestured toward the window. "It's beautiful." Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. As if no one had ever seen his home as anything more than a display of wealth. "The contract," he said suddenly, walking to a sleek desk in the corner and pulling out a thick folder. "Everything we discussed is in writing. Terms, compensation, expectations." I took the folder with trembling hands, the weight of it somehow making everything feel more real. "And if I say no?" "Then you walk away with no hard feelings and a guarantee that Helena will never bother you again. I'll also make sure you get a position at any company in the city that you want." "And if I say yes?" Clark moved to stand directly in front of me, close enough that I could see the flecks of silver in his blue eyes. "Then starting tomorrow, you become Sarah Sterling's girlfriend. You move into the guest suite here. We'll need to be seen coming and going together. You'll attend events with me, meet my friends, my business associates. You'll need to look the part, so we'll get you a wardrobe, a stylist, whatever you need." The magnitude of what he was asking hit me like a freight train. This wasn't just about pretending to be his girlfriend. This was about becoming someone else entirely. Stepping into a world where I didn't know the rules, where one wrong move could expose us both. "I'm scared," I admitted, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Clark's expression softened, and he reached out to touch my arm gently. "I know. I'm scared too." "You? Scared of what?" "Of what happens if this doesn't work. Of what happens if it does." His thumb traced a small circle on my arm, and I felt that electric shock again. "Of what happens when it's over." For a moment we just stood there in the golden light of his apartment, looking at each other like we were seeing something we hadn't expected to find. The chemistry that had sparked in the lobby was still there, humming between us like a live wire. "Sarah," he said softly, and the way he said my name made my heart flutter. "I know I'm asking for the impossible, but I promise you, if you do this, I'll make sure you never have to feel small again. No one will ever make you feel like you don't belong." I looked down at the contract in my hands, then back up at Clark. In his eyes I saw desperation, yes, but also something else. Hope and respect. The same respect I'd been craving my entire life. "If I sign this," I said slowly, "everything changes. My life, my future, everything." "Yes," he agreed. "For both of us." I thought about Helena's cruel words, about the broken crystal, about all the times I'd been made to feel invisible and worthless. Then I thought about the way Clark had looked at me in that lobby, not like a coffee girl or a nobody, but like someone worth saving, like someone worth protecting. "Where do I sign?" I asked. The smile that spread across Clark's face was like sunrise, transforming his entire appearance. "Are you sure?" "No," I said honestly, "but I'm doing it anyway." He handed me a gold pen that probably cost more than my monthly rent, and I signed my name at the bottom of the contract with a flourish that felt like jumping off a cliff. "Welcome to the family business, girlfriend," Clark said, and the way he said girlfriend made it sound like a promise. As I set the pen down, I realized that the scared, humiliated girl who'd been on her knees in that lobby was gone. In her place stood someone new, Someone who was about to discover just how far she could fall, or how high she could fly. The real adventure was just beginning. Absolutely not. I stared at my reflection in the floor-to-ceiling mirror of the most exclusive boutique in Manhattan, wearing a dress that cost more than I used to make in 6 months. The midnight blue silk clung to curves I didn't even know I had, and the way it caught the light made me look like someone who belonged in Clark's world. That was exactly the problem. "Sarah, you look stunning," Clark said from behind me, his voice carrying a note of awe that made my stomach flutter dangerously. "Perfect for tonight." "I look like I'm playing dress-up in someone else's life," I shot back, tugging at the neckline that felt far too low despite being perfectly tasteful. "This isn't me, Clark. This will never be me." We'd been at this for 3 hours, stylists, makeup artists, personal shoppers, all treating me like a doll to be transformed. Tomorrow night was the Morrison Foundation Gala, one of the most exclusive social events of the year, and Clark needed his girlfriend to look the part. The problem was, the more I looked the part, the more I felt like a fraud. "You're right," Clark said quietly, stepping closer until I could see him in the mirror behind me. "This isn't the woman I met yesterday. The woman I met was brave enough to help a stranger in desperate need. She was strong enough to stand up after being humiliated in front of half of Manhattan. She was real." His hands settled gently on my shoulders, and I felt that familiar electric shock. "But that woman is still there, Sarah. The dress doesn't change who you are. It just shows the world what I already see." I met his eyes in the mirror, and for a moment, the boutique with its hovering assistants and racks of impossible expensive clothes faded away. There was something in his gaze that made me feel like maybe, just maybe, I wasn't completely out of my depth. "What if they can tell?" I whispered. "What if they look at me and know I don't belong?" "Then they're idiots," Clark said firmly, "and their opinion doesn't matter anyway." A sharp knock on the boutique's door interrupted our moment, and both Clark and I turned to see Vivian Morrison herself pressing her face against the glass like a predator scenting prey. Her red hair was perfectly styled, her designer coat probably cost more than most people's cars, and her smile was the kind that made small animals run for cover. "She found us," I breathed, suddenly feeling very exposed in the revealing dress. Clark's jaw tightened, but his hands remained steady on my shoulders. "Remember what we practiced. You're confident, you're in love with me, and you're not intimidated by anyone." The boutique owner, a thin woman named Margot who clearly recognized the value of Clark's business, reluctantly opened the door. "Clark, darling." Vivian's voice was sickeningly sweet as she swept into the boutique like she owned it. "What a delicious coincidence running into you here. And this must be your little project." The way she said project made it clear she didn't buy our relationship for a second. I felt my carefully constructed confidence begin to crumble. But then Clark's hand slipped down to take mine, his fingers interlacing with mine in a gesture that felt surprisingly natural. "Vivian," Clark's voice was coolly polite. "I'd like you to meet Sarah, my girlfriend." "Of course." Vivian's smile was razor sharp as her eyes raked over me from head to toe. "How charming. Tell me, Sarah, what is it you do? Besides looking decorative, I mean." The insult hit its mark and I felt heat rising in my cheeks. This was exactly what I'd been afraid of, being exposed as a fraud in front of someone who could destroy us both. "I'm a consultant," I heard myself say, the lie slipping out before I could stop it. "A consultant," Vivian repeated, her tone suggesting she found this hilarious. How wonderfully vague. What sort of consulting? My mind went blank. I could feel Clark's tension beside me, could practically hear him willing me to stay strong, but I was drowning. "Strategic development," Clark said smoothly, squeezing my hand. "Sarah has been invaluable in helping me understand market demographics that we've been missing. Her insights have already saved the company millions." The pride in his voice was so genuine that for a moment I almost believed it myself. Vivian's smile faltered slightly. "How fascinating," she purred. "And where did you two meet? I don't recall seeing Sarah at any of our usual gatherings." "We met at a coffee shop," I said, finding my voice again. The truth was always easier than lies. I was working there and Clark came in every morning for his espresso. Extra hot, no sugar, just a splash of cream. Clark's eyes widened slightly in surprise. I had been paying attention during all those months of serving him, remembering details he probably didn't even know I'd noticed. After 3 weeks of the most intelligent conversations I'd ever had over morning coffee, Clark continued seamlessly. I finally worked up the courage to ask her out. Best decision I ever made. The way he looked at me when he said it made my heart skip several beats. There was something in his expression that went beyond acting, beyond the needs of our contract, something that felt dangerously real. How romantic. Vivian's voice had lost some of its sweetness. And you're attending the Morrison Foundation Gala tomorrow night? Wouldn't miss it, Clark said. Sarah's been looking forward to it for weeks. Actually, I'd been dreading it for weeks, but I managed a bright smile. I can't wait to support such an important cause. Wonderful. Vivian stepped closer, close enough that I could smell her overpowering perfume. I do hope you'll save me a dance, Clark. For old time's sake. I'm afraid I'll be too busy dancing with my girlfriend, Clark replied, bringing our joined hands up to press a soft kiss to my knuckles. The gesture was small, but the way his lips lingered against my skin sent shockwaves through my entire nervous system. Vivian's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something ugly underneath. Of course. Well, I should let you get back to your shopping. I'm sure you have so much to learn about our world, Sarah. After she left, the boutique felt several degrees warmer. I realized I'd been holding my breath. You did great, Clark said, but I could hear the concern in his voice. I almost blew it, I said, sinking into one of the boutique's plush chairs. The consulting thing, where did that even come from? It came from someone thinking fast under pressure. Clark sat across from me, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. And for the record, you weren't wrong. The insights you gave me about the market demographics, about how people like you see companies like mine, that was worth millions in perspective alone. I looked at him, this impossibly handsome, impossibly wealthy man who was looking at me like I'd just solved world hunger. You're serious. Dead serious. Sarah, you see things that people in my world miss because we're too insulated, too removed from real life. Your perspective is exactly what Sterling Enterprises needs. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at it and felt my blood turn to ice. Interesting choice of boyfriend, coffee girl. Let's see how long you can keep up the act before you embarrass yourself publicly. H. Helena had found my number. What is it? Clark asked, noticing my change in expression. I showed him the message, and his face darkened. How did she get your number? I don't know, but Clark... I looked up at him, fear creeping into my voice. What if she's right? What if I can't do this? Tomorrow night I'll be surrounded by people like her and Vivian, people who've been playing these games their whole lives. What if I humiliate us both? Clark stood up and moved to kneel in front of my chair, taking both of my hands in his. Hey, look at me. I met his eyes, drowning in the intensity of his gaze. You've already proven you can handle anything they throw at you. You just went toe-to-toe with Vivian Morrison and came out ahead. You're stronger than you know, Sarah. I don't feel strong. Then trust me to be strong enough for both of us, he said softly. We're in this together, remember? Partners. The word partners hit me differently than fake girlfriend or contract employee. It sounded like something real, something equal. Partners, I repeated, testing the word. Partners, Clark confirmed, squeezing my hands. Which means tomorrow night we're going to walk into that gala and show everyone exactly what we're made of. Together. Looking into his eyes, I felt something shift inside me. Maybe I couldn't do this alone, but with Clark beside me, believing in me, protecting me. Maybe I was stronger than I knew. Okay, I said, straightening my shoulders. Let's give them a show they'll never forget. Clark's smile was brilliant. That's my girl. The words sent a thrill through me that had nothing to do with our contract and everything to do with the way he was looking at me, like I was precious, like I was worth fighting for. Tomorrow night would be our first real test. And despite my fears, I was starting to think we might just pass with flying colors. Remember, you belong here just as much as anyone else. Clark's whispered words in my ear sent shivers down my spine as our limousine pulled up to the Morrison Foundation Gala. Through the tinted windows, I could see a red carpet lined with photographers, socialites dripping in diamonds, and enough security to protect a small country. My hands trembled as I smoothed the midnight blue dress that had transformed me into someone I barely recognized. "Easy for you to say," I murmured back, watching a woman step out of the car ahead of us wearing what had to be $1 million worth of jewelry. "You were born for this world." Clark's hand found mine, his thumb tracing calming circles across my knuckles. "No one is born for this, Sarah. They just get better at pretending." He turned to face me fully, his blue eyes intense in the dim light of the car. "Besides, you're not alone. We're a team, remember?" The word team sent that familiar flutter through my chest. Over the past few days, as we'd practiced our story and prepared for tonight, something had shifted between us. The lines between acting and reality had begun to blur in ways that both thrilled and terrified me. "Mr. Sterling," the driver announced, "we've arrived." Clark squeezed my hand one final time. "Ready to give the performance of our lives?" Before I could answer, the door opened and Clark stepped out, immediately straightening into the confident CEO the world expected to see. He turned back to offer me his hand, and as I emerged from the car, camera flashes exploded around us like fireworks. Clark, who's the mystery woman? Is this the new girlfriend we've been hearing about?" Sarah, look this way." The fact that they already knew my name sent a chill through me. Clark's arm wrapped around my waist, pulling me close against his side as we walked down the red carpet. His touch was possessive, protective, and something else that made my heart race. "Just breathe," he murmured against my temple, his lips barely brushing my skin. "You're perfect." The way he said perfect made it sound like he meant it beyond our act. Inside the Plaza Hotel's grand ballroom, the gala was a masterpiece of old money elegance. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over marble floors, while Manhattan's elite mingled beneath soaring ceilings painted with gold leaf. I'd never felt more out of place or more determined to prove I belonged. "Clark," a distinguished older man approached us, his smile warm, but his eyes calculating. "Good to see you. And this must be the famous Sarah we've all been hearing about." "Sarah, meet Senator Richardson," Clark said smoothly. "Senator, my girlfriend, Sarah Chen." I offered my hand, grateful for the hours Clark had spent teaching me the subtle art of the political handshake, firm enough to show confidence, brief enough to show respect. "A pleasure," I said, meeting the senator's eyes directly. "I've been following your work on the infrastructure bill. The provisions for small business development are particularly impressive." The senator's eyebrows rose slightly in surprise. "You follow politics?" "When it affects real people's lives, absolutely," I replied, drawing on years of watching my immigrant parents struggle with policies that politicians never seem to consider from ground level. Clark's hand tightened slightly on my waist. Pride, I realized, not warning. "Refreshing." The senator smiled, and this time it seemed genuine. "We need more people who understand the connection between policy and reality." As the senator moved on, Clark leaned down to whisper in my ear. "Where did that come from?" "You're not the only one who reads, billionaire boy," I teased, then immediately flushed at my audacity. Clark's laugh was rich and genuine. "Billionaire boy?" "Sorry, don't apologize. I like it when you're yourself." Before I could process what that meant, a familiar voice cut through the crowd like a knife. Well, if it isn't Clark's little charity case." Helena Sterling materialized beside us like a perfectly dressed nightmare, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. She wore a blood-red gown that probably cost more than most people's houses, and her presence immediately made the air feel 20 degrees colder. "Helena," Clark's voice carried a warning. "I thought we discussed this." "Oh, we did. But I couldn't resist meeting your girlfriend properly." Helena's eyes raked over me with unconcealed disdain. Tell me, Sarah, are you enjoying playing dress-up in our world? The words hit their mark, and I felt that familiar shame creeping up my throat. But then I remembered Clark's words. You belong here just as much as anyone else. Actually, I said, straightening my spine, I'm enjoying getting to know the real people behind all the beautiful facades. It's fascinating how different some people are when you scratch beneath the surface. Helena's smile faltered slightly. How quaint. Sarah was just telling Senator Richardson about her insights on the infrastructure bill, Clark added smoothly. Her perspective on how policy affects working families was quite enlightening. I'm sure. Helena's tone suggested she found nothing enlightening about my existence. Though I suppose everyone needs a hobby. That's when Vivian Morrison appeared, resplendent in emerald green silk, her red hair styled in an elaborate updo that probably required its own engineering degree. Clark, darling, she air-kissed both his cheeks, lingering just a moment too long. And Sarah, how unexpected to see you here. Unexpected? I asked, finding courage I didn't know I possessed. Well, this isn't exactly the coffee shop crowd, is it? Vivian's laugh was like breaking glass. I felt Clark tense beside me, his protective instincts flaring, but I placed a gentle hand on his chest. This was my fight. You're absolutely right, I said with a smile. The people I used to serve coffee to were much more genuine. They said please and thank you. They treated service workers like human beings, and they didn't feel the need to put others down to make themselves feel important. The silence that followed was deafening. I could see Helena and Vivian exchanging glances, recalculating their assessment of me. How refreshing, Vivian finally managed, though her smile looked painful. Excuse me, Helena said stiffly. I need to powder my nose. As both women retreated, I realized I was shaking, not from fear, but from adrenaline. That, Clark said quietly, was incredible. I can't believe I just did that. I can. He turned to face me fully, his hands coming up to frame my face gently. You're remarkable, Sarah Chen. Absolutely remarkable. The way he was looking at me made the entire ballroom fade away. For a moment, it was just us, standing in our own private world while hundreds of people swirled around us. Clark, I started, but the words died as he stepped closer. Dance with me, he said softly. He led me onto the dance floor as the orchestra began a slow waltz. Clark's hand settled on my waist while the other took mine, and suddenly we were moving together like we'd been dancing for years instead of days. You're full of surprises, he murmured as we swayed together. Is that good or bad? It's perfect. His eyes never left mine. Sarah, I need to tell you something. May I cut in? General Morrison, Vivian's father, stood beside us in his military dress uniform, his expression unreadable. Clark's jaw tightened, but protocol demanded he step aside. Of course, General. As Clark reluctantly released me, General Morrison took his place. His grip was firm, but not unkind, and his weathered face held a shrewd intelligence that reminded me why he'd become one of the most powerful men in Washington. So, he said as we began to dance, you're the young woman who's captured Clark Sterling's attention. I suppose I am. My daughter seems to think you're not suitable for him. I met his eyes directly. And what do you think, General? He studied me for a long moment. I think Clark Sterling is a smart man who doesn't make decisions lightly. If he chose you, there's a reason. His words surprised me. I thought you wanted him to marry Vivian. I want my daughter to be happy, he said simply. But I've been watching Clark for the past 10 minutes, and I've never seen him look at Vivian the way he looks at you. My heart skipped. What do you mean? Like she's his whole world, General Morrison said quietly. Like he'd burned down everything he's built to protect her. Before I could respond, the music ended and Clark was back at my side, his hand immediately finding the small of my back. General. Clark nodded respectfully. Clark, you have excellent taste. The general's eyes twinkled as he looked between us. I believe I owe you both an apology, and perhaps a conversation about those contracts." As General Morrison walked away, I stared after him in shock. "What just happened?" I whispered. Clark's smile was brilliant. "I think we just won." But as I looked across the ballroom and saw Vivian's face contorted with rage and Helena whispering furiously to a group of socialites, I had the distinct feeling that winning this battle might have just started a war. And I wasn't sure either of us was prepared for what was coming next. "They know." Clark's voice cut through the morning silence of his penthouse like a blade. His phone still pressed to his ear as he stared out at the Manhattan skyline. I sat frozen at the breakfast table, a half-eaten croissant turning to ash in my mouth as I watched his shoulders tense with each word from whoever was on the other end of that call. "How much do they know?" he asked quietly, but I could hear the steel underneath his calm tone. 3 days had passed since the gala. 3 perfect days where I'd almost allowed myself to believe that maybe this could work. That maybe Clark and I had stumbled into something real amid all the pretense. But the way he was standing now, rigid with barely controlled fury, told me our fairy tale was about to come crashing down. "I understand. Thank you for the warning." He hung up and stood motionless for a long moment, still facing away from me. When he finally turned around, his expression was carefully blank. The same mask I'd seen him wear in business meetings, when he was about to deliver devastating news. "Clark?" I set down my coffee cup with trembling hands. "What's wrong?" "Helena hired a private investigator." His voice was completely devoid of emotion. "They have photos of you working at the coffee shop, interviews with your former co-workers, records of every job you've ever had. They know exactly who you were before you met me." The words hit me like physical blows. And tonight, at the Sterling Foundation Board dinner, Helena plans to expose our relationship as a fraud in front of the most powerful people in New York. Clark moved to the window, his hands clasped behind his back like he was preparing for battle. "She's going to humiliate you publicly, Sarah. She's going to destroy any chance you might have had of making a real life in this world." I stood up on unsteady legs, my chest tight with panic. "What about you? What about the company?" "General Morrison has already started pulling his contracts. When this comes out, when it becomes public that I faked a relationship to avoid a business merger..." Clark's jaw tightened. "I'll lose everything. The company, the employees, 40 years of my family's legacy." The magnitude of what was about to happen crashed over me like a wave. This wasn't just about our fake relationship anymore. This was about lives, jobs, everything Clark had worked for. "We have to run," I said desperately. "We can leave the city, go somewhere else, start over." "No." Clark's voice was final. "I won't run, and I won't let you sacrifice your future for my mistakes." "Your mistakes?" I stared at him in disbelief. "Clark, I signed that contract. I took your money. I'm just as responsible. You were trying to survive." He spun around, his careful composure finally cracking. "You were a woman with nothing who took a chance to build something better. I was a coward who was too proud to face one obsessed socialite, and now my weakness is going to destroy both our lives." The pain in his voice broke something inside me. Over the past few days, I'd seen glimpses of the man behind the billionaire facade. Someone who carried the weight of thousands of employees on his shoulders. Someone who'd been lonely for so long he'd forgotten what genuine connection felt like. Someone who'd started looking at me like I was the most precious thing in his world. "There has to be another way," I whispered. Clark's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at it, and his face went even paler. "What now?" I asked. He handed me the phone, and I read the message that made my blood turn to ice. "Clock's ticking, brother. Withdraw from tonight's dinner and publicly end your pathetic charade, or I'll make sure the coffee girl's humiliation is so complete she'll never show her face in this city again. You have 2 hours to decide. H." I stared at the words until they blurred, feeling the walls of this beautiful penthouse closing in around me. Everything we'd built, every moment of connection, every spark of something real, it was all about to be destroyed by one woman's cruelty. "I have to go," I said quietly, setting the phone down. "What?" Clark's head snapped up, I have to leave, now, before tonight. I was already moving toward the bedroom where I'd been staying, my mind racing. If I disappear, if I'm not there for her to humiliate, maybe you can salvage something. Tell them I got cold feet, that I couldn't handle your world. At least your reputation might survive. Sarah, stop. Clark caught my arm as I tried to walk past him. You're not running away. Yes, I am. The words tore out of me like a scream. Don't you understand? I was never supposed to be here. I'm a coffee shop girl who got in way over her head, and now I'm going to destroy everything you've built because I was stupid enough to think I could belong in your world. That's not true. It is true. Tears were streaming down my face now. All my carefully constructed confidence crumbling. Helena was right from the beginning. I'm nobody, Clark. I'm nothing. And the longer I stay here, the more damage I'm going to do to everything you care about. Clark's hands came up to frame my face, forcing me to look at him. Listen to me very carefully, Sarah Chen. You are not nobody. You are not nothing. You are the strongest, bravest, most genuine person I have ever met. And if this world can't see that, then this world doesn't deserve you. But your company can be rebuilt. His thumbs wiped away my tears with infinite gentleness. Money can be earned back. Contracts can be renegotiated. But you, Sarah, you're irreplaceable. The raw emotion in his voice made my heart shatter and soar at the same time. Clark, I whispered. What are you saying? I'm saying that somewhere in the middle of this insane charade, I fell in love with you. His blue eyes searched mine desperately. I'm saying that you've become more important to me than any business deal, any contract, any amount of money. I'm saying that if I have to choose between Sterling Enterprises and you, I choose you. Every single time. The world stopped spinning. You... What? I love you, he repeated, his voice stronger now. I love your courage, your intelligence, your refusal to be intimidated by people who think they're better than you. I love the way you see right through all the bullshit to what really matters. I love that you make me want to be a better man. I stared at him, my heart hammering so hard I was sure he could hear it. But this was supposed to be fake. We had a contract. Screw the contract. Clark's smile was soft and real and devastating. The best things in life don't come with contracts, Sarah. They come with taking chances, making leaps of faith, choosing love over fear. For a moment, standing there in his arms with tears on my cheeks and my whole world falling apart, I let myself believe it could be that simple. That love could conquer Helena's cruelty, Vivian's obsession, the vast gulf between our worlds. But then my phone rang, shattering the moment. The caller ID made my blood freeze. Unknown number. Don't answer it, Clark said quietly. But I already knew it was too late. Helena had made her move, and whatever was coming next would change everything. Hello? I answered with a voice that barely shook. Sarah, dear. Helena's voice was honey over poison. I hope you enjoyed your little fairy tale because it ends tonight. I have a photographer outside Clark's building right now, and in 30 minutes every major news outlet in the city will receive a very interesting story about the coffee shop girl who seduced her way into Manhattan high society. Helena, unless of course you'd prefer to save yourself the public humiliation and simply disappear. I've taken the liberty of purchasing you a plane ticket to Seattle. One way. The choice is yours. Leave quietly now, or stay and watch as I destroy any chance you'll ever have of building a respectable life anywhere. The line went dead, leaving me staring at Clark with my heart in pieces. What did she say? He asked, though his expression told me he already knew. She's giving me 30 minutes to leave town or she destroys both of us publicly. Clark was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working as he processed our options. When he finally spoke, his voice was deadly calm. Then I guess it's time to stop playing defense. What do you mean? Clark's smile was sharp and dangerous, the expression of a man who'd built an empire and wasn't about to let it fall without a fight. I mean, my dear girlfriend, that Helena Sterling is about to learn that the biggest mistake you can make in business is underestimating your opponent. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. Marcus, It's Clark. I need you to call an emergency board meeting for tonight. And Marcus? Make sure every major media outlet in the city knows about it. It's time the world learned the truth about the Sterling family. As Clark began making calls, preparing for what felt like the battle of our lives, I realized that our fairy tale wasn't ending. It was about to become something far more dangerous and beautiful. A love story worth fighting for. Ladies and gentlemen, before we begin tonight's board meeting, I have something to say about the woman I love. Clark's voice rang out across the Sterling Foundation boardroom, amplified by the microphones that would broadcast his words to every major news outlet in the city. I stood beside him at the head of the massive mahogany table, my heart hammering as I faced the most powerful people in New York. Board members, investors, politicians, and journalists all packed into the room that would decide our fate. Helena sat at the far end of the table, her face a mask of barely controlled rage. She'd expected Clark to withdraw from the meeting, to slink away in defeat. Instead, he'd called the media himself, turning what was supposed to be her moment of triumph into his declaration of war. My sister believes, Clark continued, his voice steady and strong, that I've been deceiving all of you about my relationship with Sarah Chen. She's right. I have been lying to you. A murmur rippled through the room. I felt my knees go weak, certain that Clark was about to throw himself on his sword to protect me. His hand found mine under the table, squeezing gently. The lie, he said, his blue eyes never leaving mine, is that this relationship was ever fake. Because the truth is, I fell in love with Sarah the very first day I met her. My breath caught. That wasn't the story we'd practiced. That wasn't what we'd agreed to say. 3 months ago, Clark continued, turning to address the room, I started going to a coffee shop in our building's lobby. Not for the coffee. God knows we have perfectly good coffee on every floor. But because there was a woman there who made me remember what it felt like to be human instead of just a business machine. Helena's chair scraped against the floor as she started to stand. Clark, this is ridiculous. Sit down, Helena. Clark's voice carried such authority that even she obeyed. You wanted the truth exposed tonight. Well, here it is. He turned back to me, and the love in his eyes made my heart skip several beats. Sarah Chen never asked me for anything. Not money, not status, not access to our world. In fact, she actively tried to avoid me because she could see right through the carefully constructed image I'd built. She saw a lonely man who'd forgotten how to connect with real people, and she felt sorry for me. A few chuckles rippled through the room, and I saw some of the board members' expressions soften slightly. When Vivian Morrison began stalking me, Clark continued, his voice growing stronger. When her father threatened to destroy this company unless I married his daughter, I could have handled it like a man. Instead, I panicked, and in my desperation, I asked Sarah to pretend to be my girlfriend. So you admit it was fake? Helena's voice was triumphant. The contract was fake, Clark agreed. The money I offered her was real. But Helena, the one thing you never understood is that you can't fake the way Sarah looks at me. You can't fake the way she makes me laugh, or the way she challenges me to be better than I am. You can't fake love. He turned to face the room fully, still holding my hand. Sarah Chen could have taken my money and played along until the contract expired. Instead, she's made me want to be the kind of man who deserves her. She's made me remember that this company isn't just about profit margins and stock prices. It's about the 40,000 people who work for us, the families who depend on us, the communities we serve. General Morrison, who'd been sitting silently in the back of the room, suddenly stood up. Mr. Sterling, he said formally, are you telling us that your relationship with Miss Chen is genuine? I'm telling you that I'm going to marry her, Clark said, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. If she'll have me. The room erupted in gasps and whispers. I stared at Clark in shock, my heart threatening to beat right out of my chest. Clark, I whispered, what are you doing? Something I should have done weeks ago, he said quietly, then louder to the room. I'm choosing love over fear. I'm choosing the woman who sees the best in me over the people who only see my bank account. Helena shot to her feet, her composure finally cracking completely. This is insane. You're going to destroy everything Father built for some nobody coffee girl. That's enough, The new voice cut through the chaos like a blade, and everyone turned to see Robert Sterling, Clark's father and the founder of Sterling Enterprises, standing in the doorway. His silver hair was perfectly styled, his suit immaculate, and his presence immediately commanded the attention of everyone in the room. "Father?" Helena's voice was desperate. "Thank God you're here. Clark has lost his mind." "Has he?" Robert Sterling walked slowly into the room, his steel-gray eyes taking in the scene. "Because from where I stand, it looks like my son has finally found something worth more than money." Helena's mouth fell open. "But Father, she's nobody. She's the woman who made my son human again." Robert's voice carried the authority of a man who'd built an empire from nothing. "Helena, I've watched you spend your entire life trying to tear down anyone who threatens your position in this family. But this young woman doesn't threaten anything except your ability to control your brother." Robert walked over to where Clark and I stood, studying me with those same intense blue eyes his son had inherited. "Miss Chen," he said formally, "my son tells me you've been instrumental in helping him understand markets and demographics that we've been missing. Is that true?" I found my voice somehow. I just told him what it was like to serve people who never saw me as human, what it felt like to watch this world from the outside. And that perspective helped him make better business decisions? "Yes, sir." Robert nodded slowly. "General Morrison, I believe you had some concerns about our company's direction?" General Morrison stood again, his military bearing evident. "I did, Mr. Sterling. But after watching your son and Miss Chen together, after seeing how genuine their connection is, I've reconsidered. Any man who can inspire that kind of loyalty, that kind of love, is someone I want to do business with." "Excellent." Robert turned back to Helena, whose face had gone pale. "Helena, you've spent so much energy trying to destroy your brother's happiness that you've forgotten the first rule of business. Loyalty is earned, not bought. Miss Chen's loyalty to Clark, even when it meant risking her own destruction, tells me everything I need to know about her character. But the investigation, the photos," Helena started desperately, "will show that a hard-working young woman caught the attention of my son and changed his life for the better." Robert's smile was sharp. "The only scandal here, Helena, is your attempt to destroy a genuine love story for your own petty jealousy." The room was silent except for the quiet whir of cameras still recording everything. Clark turned to me, his hands framing my face gently. "Sarah, I know this isn't how either of us planned this, but—" "Yes," I whispered, tears streaming down my cheeks. "You don't even know what I was going to ask." "Yes to whatever you were going to ask, yes to everything, yes to you." Clark's smile was brilliant as he kissed me in front of the most powerful people in New York, and I could hear camera flashes going off around us. But for once, I didn't care who was watching or what they thought, because this wasn't about money or contracts or social climbing. This was about a lonely billionaire and a coffee shop girl who'd found something real in the middle of a beautiful lie. As we broke apart, still holding each other close, I heard applause beginning, tentative at first, then growing stronger. Even some of the board members were smiling. "Well," Robert Sterling announced to the room, "I believe we have a wedding to plan, and Helena, you're not invited." 6 months later, I stood in the same ballroom where we'd had our first public confrontation, wearing a wedding dress that cost more than I used to make in a year. But the most beautiful thing in the room wasn't the flowers or the decorations or even the dress. It was the way Clark looked at me as I walked down the aisle like I was his whole world. Helena had been quietly removed from all company positions and was now living in Europe, far from the family whose reputation she'd tried to destroy. Vivian Morrison had found a senator's son to obsess over, leaving us in peace. And General Morrison had not only renewed all his contracts but had recommended Sterling Enterprises to half of Washington. "Any regrets?" Clark whispered as we swayed together during our first dance as husband and wife. I looked around the ballroom filled with people who'd once thought I didn't belong but now called me family, then back at the man who'd risked everything to love me. "Only one," I said, smiling up at him. His face clouded with concern. "What?" "I regret not dropping that coffee cup sooner." Clark's laughter was rich and warm and completely genuine, The sound of a man who'd finally learned that the best things in life can't be bought, only earned through the courage to love without conditions. And as we danced in the golden light of our new beginning, surrounded by the world that had tried to tear us apart but had ultimately brought us together, I knew that our fairy tale was just getting started. After all, the best love stories aren't about the perfect couple. They're about two imperfect people who choose to fight for each other every single day. And that, I thought as Clark spun me around the dance floor, was a story worth telling.